He didn't just change how the guitar was played. He changed what rock music could be. Eddie Van Halen inspired millions, rewrote the rulebook, and made the impossible sound effortless. But behind that wide smile and those explosive solos was a quieter truth few fans ever heard about. Because Eddie didn't just have heroes. He had rivals. And sometimes disappointments. There were 6 legendary guitarists Eddie admired, competed with, and in some cases struggled to accept. What caused the tension between these icons? And why did admiration sometimes turn into quiet resentment? This is the story of the 6 guitarists Eddie Van Halen clashed with the most. Number 6. Eric Clapton. Long before sold-out arenas and screaming fans, Eddie Van Halen was just a teenager alone in his Pasadena bedroom, wearing out old vinyl records and chasing a sound he couldn't yet explain. That sound came from Eric Clapton. Night after night, Eddie replayed Cream records, obsessing over every bend, every pause, every note in Crossroads. Clapton wasn't just an influence, he was the spark. Eddie later admitted that Clapton was the reason he picked up the guitar in the first place. He once said he'd spend hours trying to decode Clapton's phrasing, learning solos note for note, searching for the emotion hidden between the strings. At that time, Eddie wasn't dreaming about fame or innovation. He just wanted to understand why Clapton's playing felt alive. Then everything changed. By the late 70s, Eddie Van Halen had done what no one else had managed to do. He pushed the electric guitar into the future. When Eruption exploded onto the scene, it sounded like nothing before it. Two-handed tapping, dive bombs, harmonics. It wasn't evolution, it was revolution. But not everyone celebrated. When Clapton was asked about Eddie during that era, he famously remarked that while Eddie was technically impressive, he didn't hear much soul in his playing. For Eddie, that comment landed like a punch. The man who had shaped his musical foundation had reduced his life's work to mechanics. Years later, Eddie admitted it genuinely hurt. He wasn't trying to replace Clapton. He was inspired by him. To feel dismissed by his hero forced Eddie to confront a hard truth. Legends don't always understand the future they inspire. He never publicly attacked Clapton. Instead, he quietly wrestled with the disappointment. Their divide wasn't personal, it was philosophical. Clapton represented restraint, blues roots, and emotional minimalism. Eddie represented experimentation, chaos, and fearless expression. 2 different eras speaking 2 different languages. Years later, Eddie admitted his admiration never disappeared. Clapton's tone on Crossroads, he said, was still untouchable. When they finally met, Eddie realized something that stayed with him forever. Sometimes the myth is more powerful than the man. Number 5. Richie Blackmore. For Eddie Van Halen, Richie Blackmore was more than a guitarist. He was a force of nature. As a teenager, Eddie studied Deep Purple records relentlessly. Blackmore's dramatic phrasing, sharp precision, and dark intensity felt almost supernatural. Eddie idolized him. So when Eddie finally crossed paths with Blackmore after Van Halen's rise, he expected something. Instead, he got silence. Eddie later recalled that Blackmore barely acknowledged him. No greeting, no warmth, just a cold stare. It crushed him. Not because of ego, but because Eddie had grown up worshiping this man. That moment stuck. Eddie described it as being dismissed without words, a look that said everything. And it wasn't just Blackmore. Eddie sensed that some of the old guard viewed him not as a peer, but as a threat. Blackmore eventually commented that Eddie was a great player, but played too many notes. It sounded like criticism, but it revealed something deeper, a clash of eras. Blackmore came from discipline and classical structure. Eddie came from instinct and freedom. Over time, both men softened. Blackmore later admitted Eddie had created something truly original. And Eddie, ever reflective, wondered if he'd simply expected too much from his heroes. Sometimes admiration survives disappointment, just in a quieter form. Number 4. Joe Perry. When Van Halen burst onto the scene, Eddie was still a kid trying to prove himself among rock royalty. On tour, he noticed something that stung more than bad reviews or industry pressure: indifference. Eddie recalled crossing paths with guitar heroes like Joe Perry and receiving nothing but cold looks. No handshake, No acknowledgement. Just distance. To Eddie, it felt like fear. He believed some established players saw the ground shifting beneath them. Eddie's sound was new, aggressive, and impossible to ignore. It wasn't blues revival, it was reinvention. But Eddie never lashed out. He didn't play politics. He played guitar. Years later, Joe Perry openly praised Eddie, admitting he was blown away the first time he heard Van Halen's debut. By then, Eddie no longer needed validation. He'd already changed everything. Number 3. Tom Scholz. One show, one moment, one memory that stayed with Eddie. Van Halen shared a bill with Boston, and Eddie delivered a blistering solo. Then Tom Scholz took the stage and played something eerily familiar. Eddie later recalled watching from aside, stunned, as Scholz mirrored parts of his solo. Whether it was tribute or coincidence didn't matter. It felt wrong. What made it worse was Scholz's distance backstage. Eddie described him as aloof, hidden away, never engaging. Their philosophies couldn't have been more different. Eddie chased feel. Scholz chased perfection. Eddie trusted instinct. Scholz trusted engineering. To Eddie, originality was sacred. Inspiration was fine, duplication wasn't. Over time, respect replaced tension. Eddie acknowledged Scholz's brilliance as an inventor. Scholz admitted Eddie had something that couldn't be taught. 2 minds, 2 methods, same obsession. Number 2, Rick Derringer. This one crossed a line. Rick Derringer wasn't a newcomer. He was someone Eddie had admired growing up. So when Derringer began copying Eddie's solos on stage, note for note, Eddie couldn't ignore it. After one show, Eddie confronted him directly. He didn't object to the technique. He objected to the theft. When it happened again, the next night, Eddie made a decision. Derringer was removed from the tour. For Eddie, this wasn't arrogance. It was protection. His sound was his identity, built through years of trial, failure, and obsession. Later, Eddie admitted the irony. He'd once copied Derringer himself. But inspiration flows forward, not backward. In time, anger gave way to perspective. Being copied meant you mattered. But boundaries still mattered too. Number 1, Randy Rhoads. This wasn't hatred. It was rivalry. Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads stood at the center of a new guitar era. Fans and magazines constantly compared them, pitting innovation against discipline, instinct against structure. Eddie acknowledged Randy's talent, but made it clear he believed many of Randy's ideas came from his own innovations. Ozzy Osbourne pushed back, calling them rivals more than enemies. And that's the truth. They were 2 geniuses chasing different visions, forced into comparison by an industry obsessed with ranking greatness. Randy's tragic death froze that rivalry forever. No resolution, no reconciliation, just unanswered tension. Years later, Eddie's tone softened. Maybe he realized something painful and human. Seeing yourself reflected in someone else can be unsettling. Because rivalry often isn't hatred. It's recognition. Eddie Van Halen didn't hate these guitarists. He felt them. They inspired him, challenged him, hurt him, motivated him. And in the end, they helped shape a man who didn't just play guitar. He changed it forever. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe.